right? And that it wasn't my fault, but the actual healing. And the healing was healing from maladaptive behaviors, healing from depression, healing because I'm still not healed. I don't think I ever will be, right? But healing from those experiences and understanding why I knew all the information, but still didn't feel right, didn't feel whole, didn't feel happy, right? And what I found out, Hope, is that not only did I have the informational piece that was important, but that I also had to deal with what informational meaning the story, right? But that I also had to deal with what was happening in my body. I also had to deal with the memories in my body.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show Santa Molina-Marshall, and she is a clinical licensed holistic psychotherapist, a somatic experiencing practitioner, and she's been in the field of trauma and sexual violence since 1990. So she's been in the game a while. She's a national and international speaker. She speaks on women, trauma, mindfulness, grief, and loss, and compassion, and neurobiology of trauma, and so many other topics. She is so well versed on this topic. And she's also a published author of a book called Running Through Darkness, which is a memoir of her as a spiritual warrior. She's so knowledgeable on this topic. She has so much wisdom as she's been through it herself, as someone who experienced sexual violence at a really young age and working through her own sexual trauma. She knows a lot about this topic. And this is such an important conversation as we talk about sexual violence and things like that. But I find that a lot of times we kind of overlook the aftermath of that and what people, especially women that we're going to talk about, like we're going to talk about today, have to deal with the aftermath, right? It's not just about the shame and the violence and kind of the PTSD, but it's the trauma that gets stuck in the body. And as a somatic practitioner, this is what Santa knows very well and what she helps people with. And we're going to talk about that today and exactly what it means to like somatically experience, right? The trauma and to really work through the trauma on a somatic level. And she talks a lot about the body remembering everything and how we work through trauma by letting the body tell us what happened. If you've ever heard of the book called The Body Keeps the Score, Santa lives that and preaches that. And she is the embodiment of that and helping women do the same. So this is such a powerful conversation about just abuse and trauma. It can be triggering if you've been through trauma yourself, but I find that it's a really helpful, supportive conversation. And Santa really does have some great insight and tangible things for you to take away with to help you on your own healing journey. So let's jump in. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Santa and we are having another really awesome conversation about trauma today and taking a little different spin on, a different conversation, kind of a shift in the conversation about trauma. And Santa is here to kind of share her story and her expertise. So thank you so much for joining me today, Santa.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for joining. So you have your own story of what kind of led you down this path, right? So can you kind of, I guess, give us a little look into, because you have a book about it too, right? Your kind of journey through trauma and abuse and all that. So can you share a little bit about your story and what led you down the path as a licensed holistic psychotherapist and kind of what you specialize in?
Yeah. Thank you for the invitation, Hope. And my story. So what I can tell you, and then maybe we can get more specific, is that my story really starts with my family migrating to the United States when I was 3. And not that that's when dysfunction started in my family, because I'm sure back in the Dominican Republic, where I'm from, that there was chaos and disorder happening then. But I believe that coming into the United States, just through whatever little bit of feeling managed they may have had. So coming into the country, my father no longer had a job. My mother no longer had a job. And here they were with 6 children. And so growing up in a family where there was a lot of violence, alcoholism, drug addiction, domestic violence. My father was the alcoholic, mental illness. I have a brother who was diagnosed with schizophrenia and whom I saw grow up with that illness. And so my desire to be a social worker is what was clear to me. To be, and I mean a social worker, not like in a licensed social worker, but to be about what's happening here, right? A true, like, grassroots social worker. But then, in the midst of growing up, right, and knowing that I wanted to do something to help my family, I realized that there was so much more going on, that those were just the symptoms. So my personal story with sexual abuse, which is the trauma that I think has affected most of my life, is my sister, who was my oldest sister, and her husband. So I was 12 when the abuse started, and it went on till about, I was maybe 15, close to 16 before I was able to break free from it. So my story is a little bit unusual because often we hear that that men are the perpetrators and are the victims. And in this case, it's abused by both. And so that's where the story begins, with my trauma, being abused by my sister's husband first. And then violence has a historical background to it as well. So not only did he abuse me, he abused my sister and got her into believing that it was okay for her to abuse me as well, for her to join in as well. So that's the story. My healing experience, however, is what brings me to identify as a holistic psychotherapist, is that I wanted to do something different, not just for my family, but for myself, right? I wanted to do something different. There was a story about older men marrying younger women. My father was 30 years older than my mother.
Oh, wow.
30 years older. So
That's
the fact
crazy.
that I was being abused by a man that was probably 30 years older than me, just seeing, right? Here I am, a 13-year-old kid, abused by this 30-year-old man when my mother was 15 when she married my father, who was 40. So is there abuse here? So that's the first kind of piece. But my healing journey was about finding what worked, because talk therapy was great. And it was really freeing to know, or to hear somebody else, because I didn't know then, but to hear somebody else say, this happens and it wasn't your fault. So the talk therapy was very helpful in just understanding what had happened and that it happens, right? And that it wasn't my fault. But the actual healing, and the healing was healing from maladaptive behaviors, healing from depression, healing because I'm still not healed. I don't think I ever will be.
Sure.
Right? But healing from those experiences and understanding why I knew all the information, but still didn't feel right, didn't feel whole, didn't feel happy, right? And what I found out, Hope, is that not only did I have the informational piece that was important, but that I also had to deal with what informational, meaning the story, right? But that I also had to deal with what was happening in my body. I also had to deal with the memories in my body. And what I now understand are triggers that will come up, and to distinguish what is a trigger, Santa, from what is something that's happening here right now. Because sexual trauma is the kind of thing that is interpersonal. Most often it's interpersonal. And guess what? I can't avoid being in relationship with people, right? I always like saying, if I was a trauma survivor of an elevator accident, I could say I'll never ride an elevator. But I have to deal with people and interact with people and trust people, right? And ask for help again and trust that help will show up. So that's what I found that was sitting in my heart, in my body, in my bones, in my muscles. And that it wasn't until I began to address that along with my spirit, right? Like, where was God? I am a believer. I like to say I was, and then I wasn't, and then I became again. Until I started to really address what was happening in my nervous system, I really feel like I wasn't going to grow anymore or heal, because I had a lot of information. I knew everything about sexual violence. I am a trauma specialist that specializes particularly around issues of race and sexual violence. So why wasn't I able to feel whole?
Right.
Number one, I didn't know what that meant. And number two, it was stored in my body.
Yeah. And I think that's the important piece to pull out of that is, and I had a conversation about this with somebody a while back talking about knowing versus feeling, like knowing the information versus feeling it in the body. And I wanted to talk with you about that too, because I know you do a lot of somatic healing and stuff, but I think there's a piece that is hard sometimes for people to grasp, knowing that you can know all the information like I know all the stuff, like you've studied and you've learned and you know all the stuff and you know all of these things, but then you feel like, okay, well, why can't I, quote, heal myself, right? Like, why is the healing not happening? But you haven't felt it like in your body on a somatic level. So can you kind of speak to that piece? Because I know one of the things that you do with your clients is somatic experiencing. And I want you to kind of speak to that. But what does that look like because I think a lot of times that's like the piece that doesn't click for people, right? When they kind of can't push past that limit of like, at least, like you said, not healed, right? Because in all of this, I don't think healing is ever like a destination, right? It's always the journey. But to even start the healing path, it's like you have to feel it in your body. So can you, like, what was the catalyst for you where you started to recognize that and you could kind of start that process of feeling it in your body versus just like head knowledge?
I think that I'll tell you how I started. Yeah. How I started was with yoga. I started with realizing, so I have not tons, but I have several degrees in several different healing modalities because I was looking for what would help me.
Right.
And then, can I and then later on as a clinician, can I bring this practice? Is it allowed? Is it safe? And so that's how I ended up saying to myself, well, I'll just get certifications and all these things. And then they can't tell me, I can't say, are you a believer and do you want to pray? Because now I'm a minister and I can pray with my clients. Yoga was the first thing, realizing that I had not been living in my body in the way that I could have. But when I got into yoga poses, I actually tapped into some feelings of sadness, feelings of the trauma, but also feelings of how awesome it was to be in my body. Like that was, if I could just be in yoga, and I say in yoga at some ashram all the time, that would be delicious. And I had my therapist once say to me, so now we'll bring the ashram home, son. When you're away from all the chaos, it's beautiful, but can you bring it home? And that's the part that I didn't know how to do, right? But when I first realized, you're not in your body, is when I started to be in my body. And when I allowed myself, I love integral yoga because they focus, and I'm not selling it, but because they focus on just be in your body, like the pose doesn't have to look any particular way. As a matter of fact, instructors don't even have to show. They don't practice while they're teaching.
Right.
This is your personal journey, experience, and how wonderful. Rapallo is another form of yoga that says just follow the flow. Like it's a meditation in motion. So those kind of concepts, right, just allowed me to go into my body. I mentioned a moment ago, I think I mentioned that I also came from a very religious family. Catholic was the religion. And walking into, back in my days, churches were left open. And walking into a church, not at a time when there was service.
Right.
At a time when the offering of the candles were lit, the lights were on, the fan was going, the doors were open. And it was just another place where I could just be quiet. And because it was a church, assumed that I'd be safe.
Right.
So I just felt safe. Same thing in the ashram. I just felt safe where I could drop into my body. And so I knew then that there was something that I needed to be able to incorporate in my own healing journey, being more and more with my body. Massage therapy is another thing that blew me away. When I got my first massage and someone was massaging my backside, my buttocks, and kinds of memories came up.
It's a trigger.
Was a trigger. It was what a wonderful opportunity to also heal throughout that trigger, right? To have someone say, okay, you said hands off, right? To have someone say, you let me know what you need right now. Just sit here with you if that's what you need. So that was the beginning of me realizing that the healing needed to be embodied. And also later on, understanding after getting the somatic experience certification, understanding that the biggest issue for survivors of childhood sexual abuse or any form of sexual abuse is this issue of blame and shame. And that's not, we know that, right? That's not anything new. But what was new to me was being able to explain to myself and to a client why I didn't react, and being able to explain that when our nervous system's overwhelmed, it only has one job, and that is to keep us safe.
Safe, right.
That's the only thing it knows how to do.
Right.
That when I am responding from a place of threat, the most important thing is for me to hang in there until the threat is over and go into what is an automatic response, is not a choice: fight, flee, or freeze. And then understanding that behavior, fight, freeze, and flee, can easily become a pattern,
right?
A behavioral pattern, a response to threat, perceived, imagined, remembered, right? And that's what needs to be healed. So the embodiment is so essential, right? Like, can you notice what it's like for you to tell the story of being violated? Can you notice what it's like? Because when it happened, you couldn't notice.
Right.
It was too overwhelming. And guess what? You weren't supposed to know it. You were only supposed to figure out, how do I stay alive during this time? Even if it means I run, I fight, or I do nothing, right? And so often survivors will ask me that question. Well, what about me? I did nothing. I didn't fight back. I didn't say no, right? And well, yeah, your body took care of you. The problem is, and what I've come to understand is that the body is designed, the nervous system, particularly that reptilian brain, is designed to protect us.
Right.
And until it feels the exhalation, right? Until the beast has ran up a tree to safety or deep down in the waters or wherever it is, until that passes, or until you become not such an interesting prey because you're still, because you're no longer moving or breathing or challenging the predator, right? They become disinterested. Until then, you don't exhale. But you do get to a moment if you're wild and not domesticated animals like we are, right? You do get a moment to resource, right? You do get a moment to resource and come back and clean yourself up and shake yourself out and go back in, right? Survivors of sexual trauma don't get a chance to do that. And so that's the behavior. Like, why do I keep ending up in these relationships? Or and what I said earlier, why am I not happy? Why don't I do the things that I know I need to do to take care of myself? And it's because you're still trying to complete that cycle. And many cycles, right? That moment where you get overwhelmed, your nervous system gets so overwhelmed that it can't stay present to anything else except for survival. And then we wait. We wait for that cycle to be completed. Unfortunately, we wait, and then another incident happens. Sexual violence is rampant, but so is just violence in general.
Right, right.
So we don't get to complete those cycles. This is me completing the cycle, right? We don't get to be with the out-breath and notice the out-breath long enough to say, oh, okay, that one got resolved. Oof, dodge that one. You don't get to that place when something else is happening or when it feels like something else is happening. Again, because the nervous system is going to pick up every sensation, whether it's from today or 20 years. So explaining to a survivor, no, it wasn't your fault, but also your body responded and it makes total sense and it's physiological response.
Right, right. Your body was doing what it's supposed to do.
Exactly what it's supposed to do.
Right.
Even though, it may not look like what you wanted it to do.
Right.
And now we're left with needing to pay attention to when those moments come back. Hopefully it's not a new assault. Could be.
Right.
1 in 3 women get sexually assaulted, 1 in 6 boys, right?
That's
so
crazy.
It's happening.
Yeah.
It's happening.
It's crazy.
But also the triggers are happening. The body memories are happening. I've been working with a woman, just to give you a little bit of an example. I've been working with a woman now, oh my God, maybe 10 years. And just recently, like she could talk about the incidences of trauma and abuse that have occurred in the most recent years. of her life. But just now she begins to talk about how afraid she is to be alone in her room with lights out, no music, no dog, no alarm, and no gunfire, because she sleeps with a gun underneath her pillow. But she thought that's, and not that this doesn't warrant it, but she thought, oh, that's because I got raped as an adult. And just now, after 10 or 12 years, we begin to talk about, no, that's because your father was sexually in your room and you forgot. You buried it.
Yep.
Tolerate that knowledge.
Right.
But now that you're feeling safe, now that you're understanding a little bit more, that comes up.
Right. Well, and you talk about that piece about the body remembering everything. And why is that important? The body remembering. And I think that what I assume, people that are dealing with that kind of trauma, that's not really something they want to remember. Right. And like this woman you're talking about, obviously her body had suppressed that memory, but you talk about how the body needs to remember everything. So why is that important? And how does that help with the healing process?
Yeah. Well, it's not that the body has to remember everything, Hope. It's that the body does.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the body remembering is not a cognitive thing.
Mm-hmm.
The body remembering shows up in I can't sleep, Santa. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, I sent my dog away for a little while because I knew I could use a break. I got a new phone and I don't have my app for my alarm. And I'm going away tomorrow night and whatever. And now I realize my body's remembering. But what that means is that there's no cognition right now.
Right.
I think maybe something happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm beginning to realize how afraid I am of being in the dark and being in the silence. So the body remembers through sensations. And so when I say the body does remember, you have no choice. It's not a cognitive experience. What I'm saying is you're going to go on a date with some dude that you assume is safe. You've been introduced to him, blah, 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 blah. But you're sitting there not being able to hear what he's saying because you're so afraid that at any moment he's going to say something that you're not going to know how to respond to. That's the body remembering. I don't know why. One may say, why am I so nervous? I already know him, as a matter of fact. Or something that is true of my experience that you'll read about in my book if you read it someday. Why am I crying the first time someone makes love to me? Why am I sobbing? It's not physically painful. Actually, it's very pleasurable. Why am I crying? Because I'm not supposed to feel pleasure. Sexually, I'm not supposed to feel pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
That's the story that my body was holding.
Right.
This feels good, but this is wrong, Santa. You're 12-year-old. You should know that this is not okay. But it feels, and they're telling me it's okay. Right. So there's a lot of conflicting memory, conflicting stories. And then it shows up the first time someone tenderly, compassionately, lovingly makes love to me. That's when it shows up. For some survivors, it shows up with them feeling re-victimized, even when they give consent, because their body freezes and they want to say no, but they can't. Right? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, you did. You totally answered it. Yeah.
Be on that one.
Yeah, no, you did. You totally did. Well, and I think that's the piece. I know I've had a conversation with my friends before talking about this, just talking about like sexual abuse. And we hear about women who come forward, really long after the fact or whatever. And, it's really easy for people from the outside to judge like, well, why didn't they stop it? Or why didn't they? But like you're saying, it's like, I think people don't understand how the body and the mind work, and that you're not in a situation where your body and your mind are working clearly. And so like you just use it as an example where it's like, well, why didn't you stop it? Your body literally didn't know what to do, right? Your body's responding. And I think that's something that people just don't understand. Like, victims of this, their bodies respond in a way where they're, it's the fight, flight, freeze thing you were talking about. Like that's the response. That's what your nervous system knows how to do. So it's not necessarily concerned with like thinking clearly. It's like responding in the moment, right?
Absolutely. And not only is it not concerned about thinking clearly, it cannot think.
Yeah, right.
When you're in crisis, your neocortex, frontal lobe here, goes offline. You don't need to reason and think and plan and process and calculate. That's not necessary. At the time of an emergency, you need to act. Mm-hmm. You're either going to run to life, fight your life, or wait to die, which is what frees it. Just hope that if you're quiet enough, again, you won't be as interested. And so there's no need for thought. The neocortex goes offline. The limbic feeling brain goes offline. And all you're left with is this reptilian brain that senses. And for as long as it senses danger, it's going to be. And the activation is a physical experience of how am I going to be safe?
Right.
And it's not a choice that you make, right?
Right.
And you could not think yourself through this.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, because that's not a...
Right.
That's the story of why the mother runs in the middle of the street to save their child and gets hit by the car. Lady, you weren't thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't.
You're right. I wasn't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you weren't.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's really critical, right? And it's also interesting that you mentioned, like when women come forward and people ask, like, why did you wait? Or
right.
why now? Or whatever. When I first got introduced to the embodied work through somatic experiencing, it was someone who came to the agency to train on what do we tell police officers, right? Like, because they're like, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this woman changing her mind?
Right.
Why does the story keep changing? Or why aren't they going through with this criminal process? Why aren't they going through with it? Why do they change your mind? And it has a lot to do with the experiences that are still unresolved. It has everything to do with that. And information keeps coming up. Working with this woman for almost 12 years. And just now, I had a sense of, what else may have happened?
Something else. Mm-hmm.
The deep violation of sexual violence, particularly from a family member like your dad.
Right.
But just now it comes up.
Yeah.
Why? Because now she feels safer, which is the other thing that's ironic.
Mm-hmm.
She feels she has support.
Right.
Some of the family members, as a matter of fact, her dad just died a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so now I can begin to face that reality.
Right.
And it just comes up. It just comes up.
Yep. Right. And that's what I was going to say. It's not a choice. I had a somatic coach I was working with, embodiment coach working with them. And she would talk about how your body is made and your subconscious is made to like keep things hidden if you don't feel safe to feel them. And then who knows what the trigger could be for all of a sudden, either you feel safe enough, like once they start bubbling up is when your body feels safe enough for you to feel it and like kind of transmute it and work through it. But your body is made to keep things hidden that don't feel safe, right? That's just how we're made. And it's not a choice. Like, so I think that's the part like you were mentioning, like the women who don't come forward or whatever, like it's, I don't know. I just think that piece we don't talk about enough. Like it's not really a choice when things all of a sudden you just remember things. Cause I feel like that's, people get all judgy when these things come about. Like, they just remember that this happened. Like, yeah, they literally just remember that it happened,
Absolutely. I think that the other thing in terms of content, someone asked me not too long ago, I was interviewing and someone asked me like, is it necessary to have a story?
Mm-hmm.
Remember the story of the
whole,
in order to heal. And some people feel like, yeah, absolutely. You have to tell a story. You have to let it out. You have to break your silence.
Right.
And I differ in opinion to that. I don't think you have to have a story. I think you have to be willing to notice the story that your body's telling, the issue. I don't need to know whether it was your dad or your granddad or where or when. What is your body? What are the sensation? What's the experience? The other thing we don't need to know much about is the impact.
Mm-hmm.
What we need to know is what would alleviate that impact, right? I call them resources. What are the resources that alleviate that impact?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a memory you can bring in? Is there a thing? Like I use crystals and essential oils and you name it. I use it.
I love all of it.
And I use it in my practice, but I also say, hey, what helps? Here's some things that help me.
Right.
Would it be a yoga pose? That helped me. Do you want to try one? And if it's someone who practices, then they're all in for it. And if someone who is Christian and doesn't believe in yoga, because that's another religion, then we use it, right? But to be able to say the key here is noticing when your body begins to pick up the behavior of, I am going into fight, flight, or freeze, right? So being able to say, yeah, when you feel that you don't know why you're so aggressive and agitated and irritable and discontent and impatient, right? That may mean that you are stuck in some fight response that hasn't been completed. So let's notice when you're having that reaction. Let's introduce a resource like a stone or a smell or holding a puppy, right? Whatever it is for you, let's introduce that and let's notice that. That's the word. I think that's the healing word. Whatever it is, whatever the story is, right? Because the body has gotten overwhelmed. So the other piece is, I don't want to hear your story in one session. I may not even want to hear it in 1 month. The story meaning the event.
Right.
I want to know so much more about how is your body responding to even thinking about sharing about that event. Because that's when we introduce a resource. That's when you start feeling like you're getting anxious or nervous, or if you are habitually stuck in freeze, then you're quieter, you're depressed, you're not very motivated, everything takes a lot of energy, you're sad a lot, right? Well, let's look at that. And are there things in your life that are free? Is it of today? Or are you the type of person that would say, everything is okay in my life? Actually, it's the best it's ever been. Why am I still depressed, sad, or so sensitive? Maybe you're stuck in a freeze where there isn't a whole lot of feeling.
Right.
That's the point, is to not experience. So what prompted me to say that, Hope, was your comment about how the body holds and how it has felt more than what it can manage. So the other thing that I want to do is, as you're telling me your story, I want you to tell me little pieces at a time. Unlike the belief that, well, the survivor should just talk and tell their story and I'm just going to receive it and affirm, educate. No, I'm also going to stop you and say, I think that that's a big bite. How are you? What's happening? Do we need to bring in a resource? Are you noticing your body responding? Right? Are you noticing when, I don't know, the tapping begins on the desk? That's not to say that you're a survivor of violence, by the way, if you tap or shake your knee, but that is to say your body wants movement.
Yep.
What's happening? Why does it want movement? What if we gave it? So it's helping the individual who's experienced a traumatic event take little pieces of their, little manageable pieces of their story. So one can say, just a titrating, tiny little micro pieces, right, of the violent moment or the moment of impact, which may or may not have been violent.
Right.
Yeah. And noticing how the body's responding before you take in another piece, before you tell me more. And how do we address the body? What do we do for it? And that's the resource, right? A little piece, you check in, you decide. Can you take more? Can we take another little piece of the story of the trauma, of the impact while you're still present?
Mm-hmm.
Because people take big mouthfuls, but then they can't stay present.
Right. They can't handle that much at once. Right. Right.
No,
and
the body
this
says,
yeah.
but the body says, this is too much.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes right back where it's comfortable.
Yeah. That was going to be my question, because I know people, and I get this same question, and I'm not in the same line of work as you. I deal with women with chronic, health symptoms and autoimmunity, but it's always like, well, how long is this going to take? Like, that's the question. Right. And I think that's what I was going to ask, and you just answered it. It's like, your body can only handle so much at once. And it's the same answer I give my clients. It's the same thing when we're doing a healing process to help with autoimmunity or, gut issues or whatever. Like, your body can only handle so much. I'm not going to throw 87 supplements and all these things at you at once, because your body's going to freak out. And it's the same, right? When we're working through this trauma, it's like little bite-sized pieces that your body has to process. Because like you're talking about somatic experiencing. And I think that's there. I saw something online by this girl I follow on Instagram, and she was talking about the difference between like transmuting and like feeling through the emotions versus like deflecting, right? Like, there's a difference between like feeling it and feeling through to the other side than just feeling and acknowledging, and then it's moving on. Right. And I think that's the key. What you're talking about is these little bite-sized pieces, and you're asking like, okay, what do you feel right now? What do you feel with these little pieces, and being able to feel through to the other side of that before moving on to the next piece.
Well, and feel through it to the other side, because not only are you not ready for a bigger bite, right? But I like saying, if the nervous system doesn't get the exhale, okay, I completed that. If it doesn't get that, you may have taken a tiny little piece. But if your nervous system doesn't get the signal that it is safe again, then it just holds it.
Yeah. If somebody is working through this How does somebody know? And I think as you were talking a second ago about not finishing that pattern, right? Yeah, the cycle. How would someone know? Like if they're working through whether it's trauma or whatever, how do we know? Because I like how you say that your nervous system doesn't feel the exhale. How does someone know that they're stuck in that cycle and we haven't gotten through to the other side?
A very good question. How does someone know? How I know as someone, as a survivor, how I know is that I can see a little clearer, that I can breathe, that if my hands were gripping, I feel myself letting them go. I feel more of the support in the chair. Like right now, I could literally occupy more of the chair. And I say to my clients, how much of that chair are you actually occupying? Or, they're laying on the floor, their bed, whatever. Right? I could feel more of me present. I hear better. I see better. I could smell some things. And in the work, we introduce those things. I mean, I have essential oils because I believe in their property to heal, but also I want to be able to offer something like, can you smell this? And how is this different than this? Because those are the signs that your nervous system's getting the hit.
Mm-hmm.
The exhalation that comes out naturally without you, the breath is a real big key, right? How are you breathing? Oh, I always breathe. What's it like to take a little bit more breath? Opening up more, letting your lungs expand more, which, in the world of energy, we know that that's where a lot of grief is, which, by the way, you didn't ask, but I just want to throw in there that working with survivors of sexual trauma or any form of trauma, particularly sexual trauma, is grief work, death work, right? Because so much. So when you feel more alive, then you know that you've completed that cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. It's almost like your body comes back to life, right?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And you feel like, no, I can share more. Just right from the place of, and I'm going to keep breathing. How do you know when someone has not completed that cycle? There's a certain way of sharing the experience while trying to tolerate or manage, or I don't want to cry, I don't want to cry, I don't want to cry, or it doesn't matter anymore, right? Those are signs that it's too much.
Yeah,
and that's what we're looking for. If it still feels like it's too much, it is too much.
Right. Exactly. And that's the piece, listening to your body and that piece. Because I know, dealing with grief. Now, well, I haven't personally had to deal with sexual trauma, but dealing with grief and thinking, especially just thinking specifically, my dad passed away about 5 or 6 years ago. And I know, everybody deals with grief differently. It's just like everybody deals with trauma differently. Right. And knowing that, you have those moments where you're like, I don't want to cry. Like, I'm so tired of being sad. Like, I don't want to cry. And then all of a sudden you have the moments where your body just has to let it all out. And like the relief and the lightness you feel after that, that's how exactly what you just explained. That's how I just equate it to just, dealing with grief. But I feel like it's a similar thing in your nervous system, dealing with that. And your nervous system is just kind of, it's like the pressure's building up in the volcano before the volcano erupts. It's like that kind of thing where all of a sudden you let all the emotions out and then your nervous system's like, okay, like I felt that and I feel good.
Yeah. The other thing is I'm not expecting that.
Yeah.
Every time I say it.
Right.
But if we can just do a little bit, if they can just get a little bit, we take a little bit of the traumatic event, apply a little bit of resource, and there's just a little out breath.
Yep.
If I can do that 3 times in an hour session.
Yeah.
I say to my clients, which are the people I work with, I say, what's important, really what's most critical is to remember that as trauma survivors, your nervous system is activated, right? It just is on activation.
Yep.
And so often people wait until something happens, whether it's a body memory, a trigger, or another incident, or they've lost control of themselves. And they wait till that moment to say, oh man, I need help. I need to introduce a resource, right? Whether the resource is a therapist or the resource is a crystal, right? I need to introduce something. And I like saying, please remember that because your body is on activation, it could use resources all the time. And then it needs double or 3 times the resources when there's an event.
Right.
An event could be, again, past, present, in the future, whatever, real. But it's about us acknowledging that we are survivors of traumatic events and our body will forever process things differently. But am I aware? Am I noticing? Not that you're getting a little agitated here? What's happening? What's happening in here? Be thinking, what got triggered? And even if I don't get an answer, the important thing is to calm that down, to resource that.
I love this conversation. And I know we have to start wrapping things up. I have a couple more questions I want to ask you. Do you have any, I always just like to kind of give tangible things for people. And not that you haven't given a whole slew of tangible things, especially for trauma survivors, but do you have any, and honestly, I know I've talked about similar things in other episodes, but I feel like we can't ever get enough. There can't ever be enough somatic work, I think. I just feel like the majority of us just spend so much time up here. And if you don't see me, I'm pointing to my head versus in our bodies. I just feel like we can't ever get enough like tangible, practical things to help ourselves get back in our bodies. Do you have anything like any, I don't know, 2 or 3 things that you could recommend people right now to start implementing to help them get more into their body and start feeling, right? Just start feeling what it's like to be in their body again.
Movement, any kind of movement. You're not into yoga, then maybe you're into African dancing. But anything in there, moving your body is probably the most helpful thing. And even if you're in a place where I say to clients, even if all you can do is nod your head.
Yeah.
Begin there, begin wherever you want to begin. So movement is really important. Taking time to notice the thoughts that come up for you. So quiet time or meditation time or prayer time, you call it whatever you want, right? Just quiet, stillness to see what comes up, to notice what comes up. Using scents, I really do believe in smells and beginning to notice the association to different smells. So it's not just smelling them because they have a medicinal purpose,
right,
but just for the purpose of noticing different smells. The writing, the journaling for some, and all of these things, for some, it could be too much.
Right.
Like I write one sentence, that's all I want. Yeah, so titrate yourself, write 1 sentence a day. I think that the mind, I talk a lot about watch your thoughts, watch how you relate to yourself. So watching the thoughts and deciding, is that a useful thought? So I'm talking about visualization, affirmations. Yes, affirmations work and they have there's a certain formula and do it this way, do it that way. But can you just affirm yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about some high level affirmation plan or whatever, right? I'm talking about, but you just notice. How many times do you say, hey, you're so sloppy?
Mm-hmm.
Butterfingers, like whatever, right? Like how often do you say, I don't get this. I guess I'm not smart enough. Or we can easily take on the perpetrator's voice or what they made us feel. Think about ourselves, right? So I think that paying attention to your thinking is really important and deciding what do you tell yourself instead. So catching those moments, there's no judgment, there's no punishment, and deciding, no, that's useful. Mm-hmm. Or, I do drop a lot of things. So what am I going to do about it? Am I going to call myself a clumsy person, or I'm going to say, oh, sweetheart, slow down.
Right.
Maybe if you slow down, right? And that brings up also, I'm very big into addressing the inner child.
Mm-hmm.
How are you taking care of you, the adult you?
Right.
But also, how are you taking care of that younger part? And I like to say, and when you find yourself not being able to be rational, ask yourself, is this a younger part of me that just needs a little support and coaching? Because survivors of trauma grow into powerful people. That doesn't mean that all of us grows.
Right.
Being raped.
Right.
There are parts of us that are still, as we said earlier, whose story hasn't been told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true.
For me, sound was a big deal. I used to say, I don't anymore, but I used to say it's what soothes the beast in me.
Mm-hmm.
So constantly listening to sounds that help me feel.
Yeah.
Where's the gospel song or, a Hare Krishna chant?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter what you find the sound, then also using sound. Use sound. What's the sound that your body wants to make, even though you don't have the words for it? So these are all ways. And I like saying that, how do you remember your resources, right? Because they could be anything from a memory of a time that was okay to a visualization of something that's imaginary.
Mm-hmm.
For many years, I imagined myself flying like an eagle. Mm-hmm. And that's powerful. I think eagle's my medicine, because I'm all in that way. But what an interesting thing to be an eagle flying above everything, getting away from everyone, being powerful, distant, and yet being able to see.
Right.
So the metaphors of animals.
The spirit animals. I love it.
Spirit animals. Absolutely.
I love that.
So just really tuning into what makes you feel alive, safer. Do those often. Have those experiences often.
Yeah, it's perfect. I love that. Thank you for sharing those. Those are perfect and very practical things that we can start implementing now. So simple to start implementing. So I do have one more question that I want to ask you. But before I do that, can you let everyone know where they can find out more about you, about working with you? I know you have a book. So all the things that people can do to support themselves in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. So my book, the title of my book is Running Through Darkness, Story of a Spiritual Warrior. And that's on Amazon and some local stores. And you can get it by emailing me as well. And as far as getting in touch with me, my email address is hpbysanta. So it's hpbysanta.com. No, .net. I'm sorry, .net.
All right.
.net. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And there you'll find out about other services I'm doing, which I'm very happy about. Twice a month live chat. So I've created a healing community and get information about that on my website, just to continue the dialogue and have the support and know that you're not alone.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing that's very resourceful, right? Alone.
That's right. The community piece is crucial. I love that.
Absolutely.
And of course, I'll put all that, the links to that in the show notes so y'all can go check all of that out. The last question that I want to ask you that I like to ask everyone as we wrap up, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Most important thing that you can do when living in purpose is being kind to yourself. I know that there's profound things I can say because it's complicated. Living on purpose is challenging, but can you yourself love you as much as you want to love others? Can you take care of you as much as you take care of others? Can you be present for you? Then you can have purpose. You can be free of yourself and really offer to others with purpose. The purpose to love, the purpose to heal, the purpose to have hope.
I love that answer. Thank you so much, Santa. Thank you for, yes. Thanks for sharing your story and being so open in the work that you're doing and just the powerful way that you're able to help people heal. Just thank you for all of it.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I know how I can provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics that you want to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza or visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.